O projeto Pensar e Fazer Arte do Gepi, Grupo de Estudo e Pesquisa em Interdisciplinaridade, e FAFICLA, Faculdade de Filosofia, Comunicação, Letras e Artes, tem a grata satisfação de receber nos estúdios da TVPUC o pesquisador doutorando Tim de Leeuw, da Eindhoven University of Technology in the Netherlands, que participou da 10ª Conferência Internacional sobre Inovação e Management. Tim tem trabalhado o conceito de colaboração entre firmas, organizações e institutos públicos e vai nos falar a respeito de como ele trabalha com o conceito de colaboração. Tim, it's an honor for us to receive you here in our program, and I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience.
All right, Claudio, thank you very much for having me here.
Not at all, it's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure to be here. I was in the neighborhood after all. I was visiting the International Conference on Innovation and Management.
Yes, we have just finished the Congress, thank God,
Exactly.
3 days in a row.
But it was a good conference with a good
Very
program.
good.
So it was the 10th edition, and I joined like in 2010 for the first time, and it rotates in different countries. So I visited China, Japan, together with some colleagues. I organized this conference last year, and now it's great for me to be here. So
Very good. And next year in Finland?
Yes, it will next
in
year
2014.
be in Finland, yes.
Okay. Tim, first of all, I would like you to tell our audience something about your childhood and adolescence.
Right. So I was born almost 30 years ago in a place called Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Eindhoven is actually a famous city because a big company started there, amongst others Philips.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a technical region. That's good for me because I like technology. So I was born 30 years ago, the 1st of May. 2 years later, I received a brother, Ron is his name. And I had a great childhood together with my parents, Jan and Marianne, who took care of me very well.
Very good.
And since I remember, I have this interest in electronics. As I told you, Eindhoven is related to Philips, a technology concern. So I remember that when I was young, I would like to take things apart, like a radio, see what's in there, see how it worked, and then, after some time, try to put it back together. And I remember usually I kept a bunch of screws or components that I think, I couldn't fit them back in, but usually it still worked. So I thought that might be, something too much in there. So, well, my parents always have supported me to do what I like.
That is very good
so
in terms of education.
Exactly.
Should not force children to do the things they don't want to do.
Exactly. So that I really appreciated. And I was interested, as I said before, in electronics. So my parents stimulated me to study. And that's why I started to study, of course, electronics. So after the primary, secondary school, I did a 4-year education in ICT and electronics. And I really enjoyed that for the first few years. But as I said, it was a 4-year education. About 2 years into the program, I started realizing I like electronics, but I like people more. So I shifted away a bit from the electronics towards working with people. So of course I finished this technical education, and after that I moved to a bachelor in industrial engineering. So instead of making components collaborate together, I was going to see how firms collaborate and help firms improve their processes. So I did my bachelor in that.
You did your bachelor in that?
I did my bachelor in that.
So
yes.
you became more interested in human relations?
Yes, yes. So I always loved the electronics, but I moved a bit towards human relations.
Good.
Indeed. So when I did this industrial engineering, the bachelor that I just talked about, I thought, I want to go do something additionally. So I went to a university council, which is a sort of a council of students.
Yes.
And that was for me a really good experience. There were 26 students in there from all different backgrounds. So we had somebody from law, we had somebody from teaching, somebody from electrical engineering, there's a whole diverse set of people to work with.
From different areas of knowledge.
From different areas of knowledge. So I really liked that. And after a few months, I became the chairman of this university council, which I was for 2 years actually. And that's also the place where I met my wife, which I recently married to. So that's nice. So in that time I thought like, wow, how do 26 students from different backgrounds, how did they collaborate good together? And I started thinking about that and structures. And at the meantime, you know, I continued studying. So I finished my bachelor in industrial engineering and thought, wow, let's continue to focus more to the people side. And then I decided to do my master's on that. So after the bachelor, I did a master's program on organizational science in a social department of the University of Tilburg, also in the Netherlands. And there I started, you know, to look more at people. So every step I took in my education moved a bit from the technique away and more to the people side. So I did some part-time jobs there as well, you know, to get experience how the company life works, and I had a really great time. So in the student council, we also did some research. One of the things that we did was a survey to see how satisfied students are with their program, with, you know, the teachers and stuff like that, facilities.
Students' evaluation.
Yes, students' evaluation. And I really liked that. So that was my first touch, so to say, while I was doing my bachelor with research, which helped me, of course, to do research in my master's program. So that's a bit, you know, short introduction of what I did and where I'm from.
Well, not that short, but anyway, very good. Now, how did you become interested in doing this research on collaboration among firms?
Well, that's a combination. I told you about the Students' Council,
Yes.
you know, these 26 different students. So that was basically one of the starting points. Then I did my master, and in the master program there were courses on inter-organizational relations, which are organization between firms. And I really liked those courses. And then I thought, well, if we look at ongoing trends in the world, you see that, you know, increased speed of time to market, increasing complexity of products and processes. I thought, well, firms cannot work alone, you know, firms cannot do it by themselves
Actually,
anymore.
nobody can work alone.
Exactly. So, you know, from my own personal interest, but also from a society and
insight.
Organizational practical relevance, I thought, wow, this collaboration between individuals and collaboration between firms, that's something worth looking into. So that's basically what I did. I did my master thesis on research collaborations between firms, and, you know, from there on I decided I love research. I love researching collaboration between firms. So I decided after my master, when I got a job at the Eindhoven University of Technology, to also pursue my PhD there, which I recently finished.
That's very good, and you're going to defend it in 2014.
Yes, that's
March.
true. Yeah, probably something like that.
Very good. In interdisciplinarity, when we deal with interdisciplinary studies and research, we cannot do without collaboration and partnership.
Exactly.
And how do you deal with collaboration when you have people with different background and different repertoire?
Well, that's an interesting question, but the answer to that is more difficult, actually.
It's complex.
It's
I
complex,
know.
yeah. So I try to
give us some hints, okay?
So, you know, as I know, everybody's different. But
thank God.
Thank God. But what I noticed in my own research, for instance, is that, you know, people can have common aspects. You know, if you have the same educational background, for instance, you are sort of common knowledge base. You know, of course, everybody has
common culture. Let's say
exactly.
The culture that belongs to one place. But when you have a mixture of cultures, this is very difficult,
yes,
very complex.
And this is where it becomes interesting. So in my research, I looked at collaboration between firms, and I looked at the typology of types of firms. So I looked at buyers and suppliers and research institutes. And what you see that, of course, one buyer is not the same as another, but because they are buyers of you as a firm, they are sort of have common traits. And if you can use these common traits to collaborate them. The same with people, you know, if you want some insight in technology, you work with somebody who's from a technical university, for instance. So different people or different types of firms represent different advantages and different knowledge bases, as to say. And what I did in my dissertation to obtain my PhD is I looked at diversity. So I look at a firm or an individual, if you like, and I look at all the collaborations that this firm or individual has. And then you can look at these different types and you can say, wow, you know, how diverse is the set of collaborations that people or a firm work with. And then you say, well, diversity is important because diversity represents different resources, different ideas, different knowledge, you know.
Because the world has become a global village.
Exactly.
And this is almost inevitable.
It is,
right?
yes. And because what I said before, you know, the increased speed of technological development, rising R&D costs, it's very difficult for an individual, but also for firms, you know, to do everything alone. So that's why people collaborate. Mm-hmm. But then if you look at diversity, the question becomes, you know, is diversity good or bad? Well, diversity is good because it represents difference. And, you know, from this difference, from the chaos in different elements, you can obtain different resources.
Points of view.
Points of view, information, backgrounds, thoughts, whatever you like. However, if this diversity, you know, becomes too diverse, too much diversity, too many people to work with, too many different types of people or types of firms, then the chaos becomes complete.
Of course, because we are unable to control everything, right?
Exactly, and that's what I found in my research, amongst others, is that for firms it's good to collaborate with different types of partners, but that they should focus on this diversity and don't go too far into, you know, all these different kinds of relations, because you want to manage these relations, of course, effectively. And the more diverse it is, you know, there's some redundancy between people. If you work with 10 people from industrial engineering, you know, how much would the 11th from the same discipline add? But, you know, if you add this 10th person, you would also have to, you know, invest in him or her and talk to him and keep the relation active. So there's some redundancy when you increase this diversity, and also the costs, you know, to effectively manage this becomes too high.
This is very interesting because you learn a lot from it.
I did. Personally, I learned a
lot from it, I'm sure.
Yes, and for companies it's also interesting, you know. I can advise them, go outside, collaborate with others, but don't overdo it. Because then it, you know, it hampers your innovation or productivity or whatever the focus of the firm is.
Yes, it can become dangerous.
Yeah, what I found in my research, depending on which performance dimension you look at, so, you know, firms can work on productivity, they can work on developing new products or new things. So there are different things firms can focus on, but what I found in a few of these performance dimensions, what it's called, you see that if you push this diversity to the limits, then the effect becomes more negative even than the effect
positive.
Than you started with. Yes, exactly. So that's very important to
Thank you.
keep
How
in
interesting.
mind. Thank you.
How interesting to have that adapted to schools.
Yeah.
You see? It's wonderful.
It is.
I'm going to think about that more.
That's good.
And then we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
In Finland, perhaps.
True indeed, for the next conference.
I have another question here, Tim. Can you tell us about the different ways you have to make collaboration successful?
Yes.
What do you do in order to make them successful?
I think managing the relations is one of the key success factors. So I always take the simple example, if we, you know, we got to know each other here in Brazil, and if we want to work together, we have to invest in our relation.
Of course.
That makes sense, you know.
Without it, there cannot possibly be anything.
Exactly. But the point is, if you have too many things, you cannot effectively manage them all. You know, you cannot have infinite number of friends that you call or speak to every day or week. Or
exactly.
So management is important to manage the relation, to keep it, you know, active, but also don't overdo it. Don't go in too much relationships at the same time. So choosing between specific relationships is also an important management aspect in that. So what I found in some of the studies I did is that you can group, you know, individuals based on knowledge or based on backgrounds, based on education, whatever. And then you know, certain people or certain firms have specific advantages that you can obtain, and of course, vice versa. So what I would also advise people who want to collaborate is, you know, what do you want to obtain? With who do you want to collaborate is then a question that follows basically naturally from what you want to do. Give me an example. You know, like I did when I was young, I opened my radio, took all the components out, and now I want to put it back together and I have no way to do it. Then, you know, I don't go to somebody who makes paintings, because this person is probably not the best person for me to help me put the radio back together.
So you have to find the right person for the right job.
Exactly, so that's what I'm saying. So from that perspective, this management is important. what's also interesting to see, and a lot of firms and individuals don't look at that, is that you can have multiple relations at the same time. And between these relations, you can have synergetic or dyssynergetic effects. And that's for firms very interesting. I have an example here. For instance, you have a firm that wants to develop a new product. This firm can collaborate through an alliance, for instance, as a form of collaboration with a research institute to develop a new product. From a university, they have developed something. And then at the same time, this firm can have an alliance with a supplier, for instance, to dovetail their new production process. And for instance, with a customer to, explore the market for this new product. And then you see that you have, I call this 1 + 1 = 3 effect. So you have more out of the relations than just the separate ties. So that's also interesting to consider.
Excellent, very good. And what are your plans for 2014 as regards your research?
Well, what I did so far is I looked, at these different partner types, at alliances. I also looked at different types of collaboration that firms can use. So they can use joint ventures, they can do a merger and acquisition, they can do an alliance.
And
all
small
these
firms can help big firms and vice versa.
Exactly, yeah. But for instance, I did some research in the US biopharma industry, and what you see there is that it's frequently a small firm or a university or a spin-off of a university that comes up with a great innovation, but does not really have the resources and the processes to push this idea further into the market. And then you see indeed that these big firms and small firms start to collaborate. And it's very interesting also for firms to think about, how do I collaborate? Do I form an alliance, which is sort of a flexible, free way to do it, or do I set up a joint venture, which is a new organization of which both firms, for instance, own 50-50% of the ownership? Or do we do a takeover in which one firm merges with another? So there are different...
Merges with another, or a big firm swallows the
exactly, yeah.
Yes.
So that
eats it up.
It is, yeah. And there are different, these different ways of collaboration is very interesting also to look at. So getting back to your question, what would be my idea for 2014 and beyond? Well, I received a new challenge and an invitation of Tilburg University, which is also in the Netherlands, to do a 4-year project with a number of colleagues and to assess and research entrepreneurship and collaboration in the creative industry.
What do you mean by creative industry?
Creative
industry,
yes.
That is very nice.
It is. So there are numbers of definitions about what is a creative industry. So I don't want to go into this, theoretical debate. Just
tell me what you mean by.
Yeah. Well, what I mean by creative industry, it's an industry in which creativity is one of the key important elements, so to say. So, for example, you can think about art, also performing art, but design is in there, literature, So all these fields, so to say, are part of the creative industry. And I'm going to look at that industry and see,
Inside the industry, you can have all these bits and pieces inserted.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
For promoting cultural events.
For instance, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm going to look at, this industry and how it evolves
for
over
the
time.
employees or for the general public?
So I probably take 2 levels of analysis. So I look at 2 things. So I look at, one individual that might be an artist or an entrepreneur that has his own company in making paintings or
an exhibition.
Exactly. Or big companies that host events and organize things. So there are all kinds of things that we're going to look at.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's really wonderful.
If you could send me the results, the results or the progress.
I will. I'll keep you informed.
I'll be very much interested because of my project here. Tim, and that you have been working with firms, industries, etc., etc. In terms of human feelings, how much have you got? I mean, how much have you learned in terms of, not in terms of technicalities or in terms of your specific area,
right?
But in terms of humanism, what have you grasped from all this kind of experience you have acquired? And here we have the result of it.
Yes.
Right, which is your thesis.
It is,
That's going to be defended
next year. Yeah.
Next year, March 2014.
Yes. So there were two elements in your question. So personally, for me, doing the PhD after all the studies that I did before was really an enrichment for myself as a person. Of course, I research collaboration, but I don't research alone. So myself, when I do research, I also collaborate with other people.
Of course.
And that, for me, was very enriching because I worked with, professors and people who are in the field for many more years than myself, because, I'm relatively young, so there are much more experienced people. And I had the chance to work with a few of these good people in my PhD and other projects.
This is one of the best things one can have, right?
Absolutely. So I learned a lot of, besides the technicalities, also to collaborate with people on an interpersonal level. It's good if you have a fit between two people. If you like each other, you don't have to be best friends, but it helps if you have a sort of related variety, is what I call it. So it's good if somebody is different because then you can add something to yourself. But if it's way too different, totally out of the blue, then it's difficult to collaborate. So they call this related variety. It's variety, but it should be, somewhat related to yourself. And I found that with a number of colleagues in the Netherlands and also abroad that I worked with over the time. So for me, that's really was really fantastic, and I look very much forward to working with them in the future.
And do you think that this idea can be applied to different areas, not only industries, but schools, hospitals, etc., etc.?
Absolutely, yes.
Because what we have found out, sorry to have interrupted you,
sorry, no.
Is that, for example, in hospitals, doctors don't talk to nurses, nurses don't talk to the people who work in the kitchen. I mean, there is a lack of, first of all, communication and collaboration. I mean, they don't talk, they don't interact.
True.
And this does not correspond to our ways.
Absolutely.
The ways we have to look at interdisciplinarity.
Yes.
You see?
Yes. From an interdisciplinarity perspective, it benefits everybody to collaborate, and I think it would be good if people, do this more, not only within a discipline, so a doctor between other doctors, that's good, but not sufficient. They should also, what you just gave as an example, also collaborate with nursing staff, for instance, who, they work together, so it's good to also talk together and think about, for instance, how can they improve processes that they daily work with. Another thing is also, so it's within one hospital, for instance, within one organization, within one university, whatever level of subject you look at, but it's also between them. So you see that one university, for instance, or one hospital buys all these things in the market, and then there's this other hospital that does the same. And then when they start to collaborate, they can be what I told you about, these synergies. They can save a lot of cost, they can better negotiate with their suppliers, so they can save money. It's relatively easy to do, but then people have to sort of think more in an interdisciplinary way and, open up themselves to others.
Because nobody can know for sure where an idea is born.
It is. And
right? Because it can be born inside a very, very small firm, inside a very, very big company or firm, etc., but nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
The genesis of an idea is absolutely immaterial.
It is.
And nobody knows who has got the most brilliant thought to be studied or to be carried on.
Yeah. And what I've learned regarding that is that it doesn't really matter where the idea comes from, but that if somebody has an idea,
of course,
it's good that a team of people, start to exploit this idea further and develop it and test some things out, and then, the idea can grow and develop, but it can and will not grow and develop on its own. So people need to collaborate to realize that.
Very good. And what's your idea, just to finish it with, what's your idea about the Congress we have just had?
it's a wonderful congress. It's again the 10th edition, so that's really nice. We had a lot of good presentations. We had parallel sessions, where people presented different topics. So that was really good. You could choose on a specific topic, like I want to know something about sustainable energy. Then you can go to that specific session in which 3 or 4 people would present their state-of-the-art research in that field. So for me, it was a pleasure to be a part of it this year again.
Thank you very, very much, Tim, for having accepted our invitation to record this program.
Sure.
And I hope to meet you in Finland next year. And eu gostaria de agradecer ao nosso telespectador pela audiência. Muito obrigado.